Today, we are going deep into the tragic and disturbing case of a young woman whose calm, quiet life in Charlotte, North Carolina, took a terrifying turn long before anyone outside her home understood the danger she was in. Her name was Arpita Kalyan, just 28 years old, hardworking, soft-spoken, and loved by her colleagues for her steady nature. But behind the closed blinds of a small rental house, she was trapped in a cycle of fear that kept tightening around her until one afternoon, during a simple live stream meant for her followers, everything came crashing into the open in the most horrifying way. Arpita had only lived in Charlotte for less than a year. She worked long overnight shifts at a medical center, doing her best to balance a demanding job, exhaustion, and the small routines she used to keep her life together. In her short videos on social media, she talked about self-care, meal prepping, how she stayed awake during the night shift, and tips for mental calmness. To watchers, she looked like someone who had her life sorted out. She spoke gently, laughed easily, and often encouraged her followers to take care of their minds, not just their bodies. But the truth behind the camera was far from peaceful. She lived with her boyfriend, 31-year-old Raghav Sen, a former amateur boxer with a reputation that many people in her life did not know about. Years earlier, Raghav had an assault conviction, something he kept hidden from most people. But those who lived near them noticed his temper. Neighbors remembered loud arguments, sudden bursts of yelling, and the strange way the house felt closed off from the world. The blinds were always down. The windows rarely opened. Sometimes voices escaped through the walls, sharp, fast, and then suddenly silent, as if someone had hit an invisible switch. For a long time, nothing seemed extreme enough for neighbors to report. They heard no clear sounds of physical violence, but the tone was disturbing. Enough that after the tragedy, several neighbors admitted they had thought about calling authorities at least once. At her workplace, Arpita's co-workers also saw signs: small bruises on her arms, swelling near her wrist, marks that she brushed off with excuses. She said she bumped into a stretcher while rushing, or dropped a container, or hit her hand at the gym. Her explanations were usually short, never matching the patterns of the injuries. Her closest friend, a woman named Jody Menon, suspected something deeper. Jody told investigators later that Arpita had started showing the classic cycle of an abusive relationship. The calm period, the tension, the argument, and then the overly apologetic phase where the abuser behaves like everything is finally perfect. About a week before her murder, Arpita had reached her breaking point. She quietly packed a small travel bag. She hid it near her bedroom door. She told Jody she was ready to leave Raghav permanently. You could hear the fear and determination mixing in her voice. She wasn't sure how Raghav would react if he realized she was leaving, but she had made up her mind. She was going to stay with Jody until she found a longer-term plan. But she never got out. Raghav confronted her before she could walk out of the door. He grabbed her phone, went through her private messages, and accused her of plotting against him. He used saved passwords to lock her debit cards, cutting off her access to her own money. He threatened her, saying he would deal with her family if she tried going to the police. That was when Arpita realized the danger she was in was far worse than she had admitted to herself. The next morning, while he was briefly distracted, Arpita slipped out of the house, went straight to the nearest police precinct, and filed a report. She applied for a protective order. She told officers about the threats, the financial control, and his violent outbursts. But as in many cases, the request had to pass through the standard processing system. It wasn't approved yet. She went home knowing it might take days, and those days, sadly, were the last she ever lived. 2 days before her death, a neighbor's outdoor camera captured a violent moment outside the house. The video showed Raghav, in the middle of an argument, kicking over a full trash bin so hard that debris flew across the driveway. He paced back and forth angrily, yelling while Arpita stood several feet away, her arms crossed protectively. The audio captured parts of his threats. The neighbor saved the footage only because the noise scared his children. He didn't imagine it would later become part of a homicide case. On the day of the live stream, Arpita returned home from an overnight shift as usual. At some point that afternoon, another argument exploded inside the house. Investigators later pieced together that Raghav had smashed her phone against the kitchen counter, shattering it. He thought he had cut her off from the outside world. What he didn't realize was that her tablet, the one she used for streaming, was still powered on in the bedroom. Arpita ran to the bedroom, locked the door, and immediately started a live stream. In the video, she could be seen shaking, breathing fast, wiping tears. Her face showed fear, not confusion, fear of someone she knew, someone in the house. She whispered that she was scared for her life. She begged viewers to take her seriously, and then the sound of heavy footsteps approached the door, the thud of Raghav's body hitting the door to break it open, the crash as the frame swung violently. The camera blurred, the audio twisted, and then the screen went black. Only 6 minutes later, a neighbor called 911 after hearing screams that suddenly went silent. That sudden quiet terrified him. He knew something was wrong. When police arrived, they went directly to the back bedroom. Inside, they found Arpita lying on the floor with multiple stab wounds and a severe head injury. Paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene. Raghav was gone. His black Chevy Impala, always parked in the same spot, had vanished. Detectives issued an immediate alert for the vehicle and began sweeping the roads out of Charlotte. Meanwhile, Detective Warren Fielding, an experienced investigator in domestic violence cases, was assigned to the case due to the disturbing live stream footage. Fielding knew digital evidence would play a critical role. He collected the tablet, the broken phone, Raghav's laptop, and another phone found in the kitchen. He requested emergency access to Arpita's social media accounts because the live stream was essentially a recording of the beginning of the attack. Thankfully, viewers had already screened, recorded, and reshared the video, preserving evidence that could have otherwise been lost. Fielding canvassed the neighborhood. He examined doorbell cameras, outdoor CCTV footage, and eyewitness reports. One camera showed Raghav's Impala speeding away less than a minute after the live stream ended. Another camera captured him turning onto Central Avenue with his headlights off, an unusual detail investigators would later note as a deliberate attempt to avoid attention. Neighbors described past conflicts, controlling behavior, and Raghav's paranoia. One recalled him refusing to let Arpita open a package addressed to her. Another remembered him accusing her loudly of plotting behind his back. The picture forming was clear. This was not a sudden explosion. It was the climax of escalating control. Then came the flash drive. Jody, Arpita's close friend, met with Detective Fielding and handed over the flash drive Arpita had given her days before. Arpita had said only one thing when handing it over, just in case something happens. Inside the flash drive, Fielding found screenshots of messages between Raghav and his older brother, Raghav Sen, and what those messages contained shocked every investigator who read them. The brothers discussed staging fights to make Arpita look unstable. They talked about creating self-defense scenarios. They mentioned her savings over $40,000 and how to get access to it. One text from Raghav said, "She's becoming a liability." Bharat replied with ideas on how to frame situations if needed. There was also a 30-second video clip. In it, Arpita looked straight into the camera and said, calmly but firmly, "If something happens to me, he did it." The timestamp showed it was recorded only 3 days before her death. From that moment, the case shifted from a domestic murder to something far more disturbing. A coordinated plan involving two brothers, financial motives, and premeditation. Fielding obtained Raghav's banking history, revealing unexplained cash withdrawals from ATM all across Charlotte. He saw attempts to access Arpita's accounts on days she was at work. He found payments linked to an underground bookmaker, suggesting Raghav had serious gambling debts. Fielding interviewed the bookmaker, who confirmed Raghav was behind on thousands of dollars and had been warned recently. Cell tower data showed Raghav turned off his phone minutes before Arpita's live stream. Bharat's phone, on the other hand, connected near the same pool hall tied to the bookmaker, contradicting his claim that he was home all night. Fielding confronted Bharat. Bharat denied everything. He insisted the messages were exaggerated, the conversations meaningless, but the evidence said otherwise. Surveillance footage showed him handing an envelope to Raghav days earlier in the pool hall parking lot. Login attempts to Arpita's bank accounts came from a device in Bharat's apartment. Messages showed him encouraging Raghav not to let Arpita leave. Another message said, "Make sure the money moves first." Then came a key breakthrough. Highway surveillance captured the Impala moving north toward Winston, Salem hours after the murder. Later, South Carolina authorities detected a brief phone signal from Raghav's device crossing the state line. Soon after that, troopers found the abandoned Impala outside a rural motel in Gaffney. In the trunk, a duffel bag with blood-soaked clothing. Raghav was walking along a service road behind the motel when officers found him. He surrendered without a fight. Back in Charlotte, forensic tests confirmed the blood on the clothing was Arpita's. Fibers on the clothes matched the carpet in her bedroom. When detectives pressed Bharat again, more evidence surfaced. A $10,000 transfer had been attempted the day before the murder, from Arpita's savings to a joint account where both brothers were listed as authorized users. It failed only because of a verification issue. Bharat's cloud storage also contained draft statements presenting Arpita as unstable and aggressive, documents apparently intended to protect Raghav legally if police were ever involved. Investigators found a voice message from Raghav to Bharat saying, "If she runs, we lose it all." Bharat replied, "Then don't let her run. If she goes crazy, that's your angle. Just make sure the money moves first." The live stream ruined everything for them. Arpita going live made it impossible to stage the scene, manipulate injuries, or create self-defense narratives. The brothers panicked. Raghav attacked her and fled before completing the financial transfer. The case finally went to trial. Prosecutors presented everything: Arpita's attempts to leave, the smashed phone, the captured live stream, the failed bank transfer, the staged injury conversations, the gambling debts, the escape route, the bloody clothing, the duffel bag, the abandoned car, the device logs, the cloud drafts, surveillance videos, and the flash drive. The jury took little time to decide. Raghav was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. Bharat was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and felony murder and sentenced to 40 years. And in the end, investigators used Arpita's case as a powerful example in training programs, showing how one victim's bravery in documenting the truth helped expose a planned crime even after her voice was silenced. What happened in that small Charlotte apartment was never supposed to be seen by anyone, not by her followers, not by her friends, and definitely not by the thousands of strangers who later discovered the clip circulating through every corner of the internet. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, one of those nights where she would talk casually to her viewers while doing her makeup, answering questions, and laughing about small things. But something had been wrong long before she pressed go live. People close to her, those few who were actually paying attention, had started noticing changes: the way she checked her phone more often, The way she paused before answering certain questions, the way she laughed less even when she tried to hide it beneath a bright smile. There had been arguments, yes, everyone argues, but these arguments had a different sound, a different weight, a different temperature. The neighbors below her first heard them 2 months earlier. Muffled voices rising, the sound of something. Maybe a drawer, maybe a chair being shoved hard. Then silence, a silence so sudden, so complete, it made the hair on the back of the neighbor's neck stand up. But she insisted she was fine. She insisted she loved him. She insisted he was just stressed. And stress, she would say softly, makes people say things they don't really mean. She believed that, or maybe she needed to believe it. That night, the one that would soon become a case file, a podcast episode, a viral clip. She had been preparing for her live stream like normal. Her followers knew her routine almost as well as she did. She always lit a small candle behind her setup because she said it made her room feel warm. She always tied her hair loosely so she could tuck it behind her ear while she talked. She always checked her angles just once, then smiled into the lens before hitting the button. This time, her smile didn't reach her eyes. She started the live stream with a comment about being tired. "A long day," she said, rubbing her forehead, her tone light but strained. Her followers started typing supportive messages, little hearts, little jokes. It helped, but it didn't fix the heaviness in her voice. She kept glancing to her right, not obviously, but enough times that the viewers noticed. Something off screen had her attention. Still, she continued. She answered questions. She laughed once or twice, but it was the kind of laugh someone gives when their mind is somewhere else. The chat kept trying to bring her mood up, but that feeling, that someone was nearby watching her, never really left. 20 minutes into the livestream, a sound came from the hallway, not loud, a soft dragging noise. Like someone was sliding something across the floor. Her eyes flicked to the sound immediately, but she tried to hide her reaction, shifting casually in her chair. "It's nothing," she murmured, more to herself than to her viewers. But it wasn't nothing. The dragging grew into footsteps, slow, heavy, coming closer. She shifted again, adjusting her position as if trying to block part of the room from view. Someone in the chat typed, "Is someone behind you?" She didn't answer. The door behind her opened a few inches, just enough for a sliver of darkness to appear, just enough for the viewers to sense that something was wrong. She cleared her throat, forced a smile, and said she might end the stream early. She brushed her hair behind her ear and tried again to act normal, but her voice trembled. Then his voice came from the hallway, not shouting, not angry, just controlled, too controlled. "Who are you talking to?" She froze. It was the kind of freeze that comes not from surprise, but from fear. A fear she had learned to hide in front of people, but couldn't hide now. Her viewers listened, they waited. A few typed nervous jokes. But something about the tone in his voice made them uneasy. She said softly, "I'm just Liv. Talking to them, that's all." She tried to sound casual, but her voice cracked at the end. He stepped into the frame for just 1 second. The viewers saw only part of him, his hand on the doorframe, gripping it too tightly, the veins along his wrist standing out like wires pulled to the breaking point. They saw the shadow of him crossing behind her. And they saw the way her shoulders tensed the moment he entered the room. People in the chat started writing, "Are you safe? Blink if something's wrong. End the stream if you need help." She didn't blink. She didn't end the stream. She didn't even turn around fully. She just said quietly, "I'll be done in a minute." Her voice had changed. Now it was barely above a whisper. He didn't leave. He stayed behind her, out of the camera's full view, pacing slowly. Every time he took a step, the viewers saw the faint movement of his shadow on the wall. She kept trying to continue talking, trying to explain something about her day, but her voice kept breaking. Her eyes kept darting to him. She was no longer hosting her live stream. She was trying to manage the situation. He finally spoke again, this time more sharply. "I thought we talked about this. I thought we agreed." The words weren't loud, but they were sharp enough to slice through the room. Her entire body stiffened. Someone in the chat typed, "This is not normal." Another wrote, "Call someone." A third wrote, "I feel sick watching this." She whispered, "Please, not now." The microphone barely picked it up, but it was clear enough for her viewers to hear, and clear enough for them to know she wasn't talking to them. He moved closer. The shadow behind her grew darker. She tried to push her chair a little forward, but couldn't without revealing her fear. She placed her hands under the desk, gripping her own fingers. They were shaking. She tried to laugh, but her throat tightened halfway through. "Guys, I think I'm going to end the live." The sound that followed stopped her mid-sentence. Not a shout, not a hit, not anything dramatic. Just the small, sharp sound of him placing something on her desk. Something made of metal. The chat erupted. What was that? Is that a knife? Call 911 now. She didn't look down at the object. She didn't move at all. Her breath started coming faster, and she hurriedly reached toward her mouse. He grabbed her wrist. The camera caught it. His fingers tightening around her arm, pulling her hand away from the mouse. She gasped quietly, trying to keep her expression neutral, trying not to make it worse. He said through clenched teeth, "We're not done talking." Someone in the chat typed, "I'm calling the police." She whispered, "Please stop, they can see." He replied, "Good." The word echoed in that small room. She tried again, desperately, "Let me end it, please." He leaned down toward her ear. The viewers couldn't see him, but they saw her reaction. A sudden shiver, a tightening around her eyes, the kind of expression someone makes when they hear a threat they've heard too many times before. "You think I care?" he whispered, and then the live stream glitched. The camera shook. The angle shifted slightly, as if something brushed against the tripod. She reached up quickly, as if trying to grab something, or push something away. A loud noise echoed off-screen, a thud, something falling. She flinched. The viewers saw terror in her eyes, real terror, the kind that cannot be faked. She whispered something too low for the mic to fully catch. The only word the viewers could make out was "stop." The live stream cut to black, and that was the moment everything changed, because while her screen went dark, thousands of viewers had already recorded the last 30 seconds. Within minutes, clips spread online. Within an hour, her name was trending. People were calling emergency services, reporting what they had witnessed. Her neighbors started hearing pounding on her door as officers arrived. And for the first time in months, the silence inside her apartment was broken by someone other than him. What the police found when they arrived would become the center of the entire case, the case that showed everyone exactly how far things had spiraled behind closed doors. And what was discovered in the next 20 minutes would lead investigators into a story far more disturbing than a domestic argument, something deeper, something darker, something that had been building long before that live stream ever began. The officers outside her apartment door didn't know what they were walking into. They had only the frantic phone calls from viewers, dozens of them, each describing the same terrifying 30-second clip. Each caller gave almost identical details: a frightened woman, a shadowed figure behind her, a metal object placed on the desk, a grabbed wrist, a whisper that didn't sound like a whisper of love, and a stream that suddenly cut out. It was enough to trigger an immediate welfare check, especially because the callers insisted the threat was happening in real time. Inside the apartment, the silence after the live stream ended felt thick, like the air itself had swallowed the noise. She sat frozen in her chair, staring at the blank screen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. His hand was still on her wrist, holding her in place, not with force yet, but with that subtle pressure she knew too well. The pressure that meant, "Don't move, don't speak, don't make this worse." He exhaled slowly, deeply, a sound that made her stomach twist. "You think I don't know what they saw?" he said quietly. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" She shook her head, barely able to breathe. "I didn't, you did." He cut in sharply. "You always do this, always pushing, always testing how far you can go." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to that low, venom-filled whisper that had once made her believe he was just misunderstood. "You thought you could embarrass me like that in front of them. I wasn't," she whispered. "I swear, I just went live. I didn't know you." He tightened his grip until her fingers tingled. "Don't lie to me." Another thud came from the hallway, someone knocking loudly on the front door. It was muffled but forceful, unmistakably the sound of police. Her entire body reacted to it, but his reaction was worse. His head snapped toward the sound, his breathing quickening. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I didn't. They're here because of you, because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." The knocking grew louder. This time a voice followed it. "Charlotte Police, open the door." Her pulse spiked. This was what she had prayed for silently every night when he slept beside her. This was what she imagined when she stared at herself in the bathroom mirror, wondering how long she could survive like this. Help. Someone who would finally see what she had been hiding. Someone who would pull her out of this. But instead of relief, she felt his fingers tighten around her arm so hard she thought it would snap. His eyes narrowed, calculating. "You're not going anywhere," he said. She tried to pull back. It was a small movement, a tremble really, but he saw it instantly. His grip shifted from control to domination. He yanked her to her feet so hard the chair toppled behind her, clattering across the floor. "You're staying quiet," he hissed. "You're going to make them leave." Her legs shook as he forced her toward the hallway. The knocking came again, louder, the officers' voices more urgent. "Charlotte Police, we need you to open the door." He dragged her close enough to the door that she could hear the officers' radios crackle. His hand gripped the back of her neck now, guiding her like a puppet. "You're going to tell them you're fine." Tears filled her eyes. "They won't believe me." He leaned in, his breath cold on her ear. "Make them?" He unlocked the door, just the chain latch still in place, and cracked it open a couple of inches. The officers could only see her face through the gap. A young woman with trembling lips, glossy eyes, and the kind of expression someone gives when they're begging through their silence. "Ma'am, are you okay?" one of the officers asked. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. His fingers pressed into her spine, a warning, a promise. "I'm fine," she finally whispered. The officer frowned. He leaned closer, his voice softer now. "Could you open the door fully for us?" She swallowed hard. "I can't. I'm busy. I'm fine, ma'am," the second officer said gently. "We received multiple emergency calls about you. We need to check that you're safe." "I'm safe," she whispered, even as her voice trembled. The officer's eyes flicked downward. He noticed the redness on her upper arm, the faint impression of fingers forming under her skin. He also noticed the way her body leaned slightly forward, as if she were being held from behind. "Ma'am, is someone in there with you?" She froze. He pressed the chain latch harder against the door. "Tell them," he whispered behind her, his voice sharp as a blade. "No," she whispered so softly even she barely heard it. The officer heard something in her tone, something that didn't match her words. "Ma'am, step back from the door." "I can't. Step back now." Before she could react, his hand clamped over her mouth and he slammed the door shut, locking it. The officers immediately started pounding. "Open the door, now." He grabbed her shoulders and shoved her backward down the hallway. She stumbled and crashed into the wall, pain shooting through her side. He paced back and forth, shaking, breathing heavily, his mind spiraling into something she had seen too many times, panic turning into rage, rage turning into decisions that never ended well. "This is your fault," he shouted at her. "They're going to break the door. They're going to take me away, because of you." She pushed herself off the wall, panting. "Please, please just let me go. I won't say anything. Just let me go." He stared at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "You think they'll just let you walk out and forget everything they saw? You think people like you get to ruin someone's life and then run away?" "I'm not ruining anything," she cried. "I just want to leave." He reached for her wrist again, but something shifted in her. She backed away, shaking her head violently. "Don't touch me." The knocking turned into pounding. The officers were shouting commands now. "Open the door or we will force entry." He spun toward the door, then back toward her. Something inside him snapped. The mask slipped, and for the first time she saw all the anger he had been hiding behind his quiet voice. "You ruined everything," he said. He lunged. She scrambled backward into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. She pushed her body against it, her heart pounding so loud she couldn't hear anything else for a moment. Then she did hear something, the sound of him hitting the door from the other side, first with his fists, then with his shoulder, then with something heavier. She looked around the room desperately. The window was too small to climb through. The closet had no way out. She was trapped. "Open this door," he shouted. "You think police will save you? They'll get here too late." She grabbed her phone from the dresser. The screen was cracked from earlier when the chair fell, but it still lit up. She dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Before she could press call, the bedroom door splintered. He forced his way inside, eyes burning with fury. When he saw the phone in her hand, he lunged again. She screamed as he grabbed her. The phone fell from her hand and skidded under the bed. He dragged her across the carpet toward the corner of the room. She kicked, clawed, fought, her adrenaline rising beyond fear. She had never fought him like this before. She had always tried to pacify, to de-escalate, to survive. But now something primal kicked in. She didn't want to survive the moment. She wanted to escape it. Outside, the officers rammed the front door. Inside, he lifted his hand. She shielded her face as best she could. Tears blurred her vision. The world felt like it was collapsing. Then the bedroom door flew open. Officers stormed in, shouting commands. He froze mid-movement. They tackled him before he could react, pinning him to the floor, shouting at him to put his hands behind his back. She crawled away, shaking uncontrollably, her body trembling from head to toe. She pressed herself against the wall, covering her face as sobs racked her body. The officers didn't touch her at first. They knew better. They gave her a moment to breathe, to exist, to remember that she was alive. One of them finally kneeled beside her and said softly, "You're safe now." But safety wasn't immediate. It wasn't a switch. It didn't flood her body instantly when the cuffs clicked around his wrists. It came slowly, in pieces, like small lights returning to a room that had gone dark for too long. She watched through tear-filled eyes as they dragged him out, still shouting, still blaming her, still insisting she was the problem. The officers ignored him. They guided him out the door and down the hall. The moment he was gone, her legs gave out and she slid to the floor, sobbing. Two officers stayed with her, speaking softly, grounding her, reminding her she was not alone. For a long time, she didn't speak. She didn't look up. She just breathed, shallow, broken breaths. When she finally did lift her head, her eyes fell on her computer screen. It was still black, the live stream long ended, but she thought about how many people had seen her. How many strangers had witnessed her fear? How many hands had rushed to call for help? She had spent so long believing nobody saw her, nobody cared, nobody could save her, but someone had, a whole crowd had. When the officers asked if she needed medical attention, she nodded. When they asked if she wanted to file charges, she nodded again. When they asked if she wanted to call someone, she whispered, "I don't have anyone." And that was when one of the officers gently placed a blanket around her shoulders. "You do now," he said. Hours passed, statements were taken, evidence collected. She sat on the couch wrapped in the blanket, staring at the wall. Not crying now, just empty, the kind of emptiness that comes after surviving something you were never sure you would. Later, she would learn something else, something that made the entire situation even darker than she imagined. The object he placed on her desk during the live stream, the thing that sent the viewers into panic. It wasn't a knife, it was a key, but not a house key, a storage unit key, one she didn't recognize, one the police immediately confiscated. And inside that storage unit was a discovery that would turn her case from a disturbing domestic violence incident into something much darker, much more twisted, and far more terrifying than anyone had expected. Something that explained why he never wanted her to leave, why he controlled everything she did, why he watched her so closely, something that would shake not only her life, but the entire investigation. And that is where the real nightmare began. She never expected the night to stretch into something heavier than fear. She thought once he was in handcuffs, once she felt the cold air of the hallway on her face as they escorted her out, once she sat safely inside the back of the patrol car, her nightmare would slowly dissolve. But trauma doesn't dissolve. It spreads, it waits, it reveals itself in layers. And the next layer was the storage unit. The detectives didn't mention it immediately, not while she was shaking under the blanket, not while paramedics examined the bruises on her arms and the marks around her wrist, not while she answered simple questions like her full name, her age, her emergency contacts which she didn't have, or her medical history, which she told them didn't matter. They only murmured things like, "You're safe now, and we'll handle everything else." But nothing prepared her for the look on Detective Rivers' face when he came back later, his expression pulled tight, his voice gentler than it had been earlier. He asked her if she knew anything about a storage key found on her desk. Her breath hitched. "No, I've never seen it." He hesitated before telling her where it led and what they found inside. At first, her brain couldn't process what he was saying. It all felt too big, too impossible, too disconnected from the man she thought she had known. She didn't even realize she was shaking again until the blanket slipped from her shoulders and hit the floor. She covered her mouth with her hands, not because she wanted to, but because her body forced her to, a reflex of disbelief, because the storage unit wasn't just a place he kept old boxes. It wasn't a place filled with tools or extra clothes or memories. It was a place filled with her, not her physically, but pieces of her life, photographs she never knew were taken, printed copies of her live streams, old hairbrushes she thought she had lost, a shirt she had thrown away months ago, letters she never wrote, pages upon pages of notebooks filled with things he observed about her, what time she woke up, how many minutes she spent in the shower, what she ate, who she texted, how often she cried. Things she never told him, things he should never have known. He saw everything, watched everything. Every step of her life had been recorded, categorized, dissected. Detective Rivers wasn't emotional as he told her this. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't need to. The truth itself was horrifying enough. She felt her lungs tighten as if invisible hands were squeezing them. Her stomach twisted violently, a cold wave rushing through her chest. She had lived with him, slept beside him, trusted him, loved him, and all the while he had been cataloging her life like she was some kind of project he needed to control, a project he intended to keep forever. But that wasn't the worst part. The detectives found a second key, a smaller one, older, rusted at the edges. It wasn't for a lock she recognized. It wasn't for anything she had ever seen him use. It unlocked a wooden box inside the storage unit. And inside the box were items that didn't belong to her: a bracelet with someone else's initials, a stack of photographs of a woman she had never met, screenshots of messages, an ID card, a small leather journal, a set of house keys wrapped with a faded purple ribbon. These weren't hers, and that meant only one thing: she wasn't the first. Detective Rivers didn't say the word. He didn't have to. It hung in the air like smoke. Victim. She felt her throat close. The room spun slightly. She pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself, but the dizziness didn't leave. Her mind raced, trying to piece together every memory, every moment, every clue she had ignored: whispers from friends that he seemed too controlling, moments when he touched her phone without asking, the way he always knew where she was even when she didn't tell him. She thought he was just protective. She thought he loved her too much. She thought she was overreacting, but now every moment made horrifying sense. Detective Rivers placed a glass of water into her hands. She didn't drink it. She didn't trust her own body to move. She felt frozen in place, as if any motion would shatter her into pieces. She managed to whisper what happened to her, the woman in the photos. "We're trying to find out," he said. "Right now, she's reported as missing." Missing, the word slipped into her bloodstream like ice. Not gone, not dead, missing, which meant she covered her face again, her shoulders shaking. Detective Rivers stepped back to give her space, but another officer reached out carefully and placed a soft hand on her back. She didn't know who it was. She was barely aware of anything beyond the ringing in her ears. Her mind flooded with questions she had never thought she would ask. How long had he been following this other woman? What happened to her? Did she disappear because she tried to leave too? Was she sitting in the same apartment months ago, whispering the same quiet, desperate prayers for help? The questions dissolved into fear. Because if the police hadn't arrived when they did, if her livestream hadn't captured those 30 seconds, would she have become the next missing woman? She didn't want the answer. She couldn't handle it, but the detectives already suspected it. Later, when they asked her if she wanted to see the items recovered from the unit, she shook her head so violently that pieces of her hair fell loose. She didn't need to see them. She didn't want to stare into a box filled with another woman's life, another woman's fear, another woman's end. She wasn't ready, so they let her rest in a quiet room at the station under soft lights with a blanket draped gently around her shoulders. One of the officers stayed outside the door the entire time, not because she was in danger, but because she was in shock. Hours passed before she could speak again. When she finally did, her voice was raw, cracked open by everything she had endured. "I want to help," she whispered. "If there's any way I can help her, I want to." Detective Rivers nodded carefully. "There is something," he said, "but only if you're strong enough." She didn't feel strong. She felt shattered, but she nodded. The detectives played audio recovered from the storage unit, a small recording device he kept hidden in a box. The audio wasn't clear, but a woman's voice could be heard. Soft, scared, pleading, and then his voice, the same voice that whispered threats into her ear, the same voice that told her she wasn't allowed to leave, the same voice that held her life hostage without ever lifting a weapon. In the recording, he used the same words he had used with her. "You think you can leave me. You think you can ruin my life. You belong to me." The recording crackled. The woman cried. The man continued, his tone controlled, calculated, cold. Listening to it was like reliving her own nightmare. Every word echoed inside her chest, tearing at old wounds, forming new ones. Tears streamed down her face silently. She didn't wipe them. She didn't move. When the recording ended, the room felt like it had lost all its air. She whispered her voice. She sounded so scared. Detective Rivers nodded, "Just like you sounded on the live stream." Those words broke her. She sobbed until her chest hurt, until her hands shook, until she felt the emotional exhaustion settle deep into her bones. The officers didn't rush her, they didn't interrupt her, they let her grieve for herself, for the woman in the recording, for the life she almost lost. When she finally lifted her head, her face blotchy, her eyes swollen, she whispered the question she feared most. Did he kill her? Detective Rivers paused, not because he didn't know what to say, but because the truth was far more complicated than yes or no. "We don't know," he said quietly, "but we will find out, and your bravery, what you went through, what you survived, may help us get the answers." Her bravery, she didn't feel brave, she felt lucky. Lucky she live-streamed, lucky someone saw, lucky someone called. Lucky the police arrived in time, because luck is the only reason she wasn't in that wooden box. Later that night, they escorted her to a safe shelter, a secure place where he couldn't reach her, where she could sleep without waking up gasping, where she could breathe without fear poisoning the air. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the other woman, wondering if she ever had a night like this, wondering if she ever escaped, wondering if, somewhere out there, she was still alive. She didn't sleep. She just waited for morning, and when morning arrived, she made a decision she never thought she would make. She returned to the station, sat across from Detective Rivers, and said, "I want to help you find her, whatever it takes." This wasn't about fear anymore, or survival, or escape. It was about finishing the story, not the story of her live stream, not the story the internet saw, but the story of everything he tried to hide, because he didn't just want control. He wanted ownership of her, of the other woman, of any woman who crossed his path, and if she didn't help now, he might do it again. The investigation grew into something far larger than a domestic incident. It expanded into a missing persons case, a potential pattern of behavior, and a psychological nightmare stretching back years. And with every new piece of evidence that surfaced, every new detail uncovered, every new truth revealed, she realized something chilling. She hadn't escaped the worst of the story. She had just survived the beginning.